My co-panelists are joining me in a few minutes. Yes, I have them right here. I'm waiting for a couple of my attendees to join in. Awesome. And we begin right away without wasting a minute. Once again, very good evening, everyone who's joining in afresh for this workshop, the second workshop for the iSchoolConnect Study Abroad Fest. This is going to be a fantastic workshop marathon as we talk about a variety of topics from session to session with some of the top panelists from around the world, right? So today we are talking about decoding test prep, IELTS versus TOEFL. A lot of you have questions around this, so we'll go through them. And with me to talk about both of these tests, I have Ben Worthington and Lanisha Adams. Very quickly, let me introduce both of you to our audience. So today we have Ben Worthington. Ben is the founder and owner of IELTS Podcast, the leading online English preparation site for all IELTS aspirants. Ben started teaching in Spain in 2004, and being a results-oriented tutor, he quickly specialized in IELTS. In order to improve further, he started interviewing other language experts and IELTS professionals. And through all of these conversations that he recorded and released as podcasts, that's how the uber famous IELTSpodcast.com was born. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Malika. Lovely to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. And with us, we also have Lanisha Adams, our second panelist for the evening. Dr. Lanisha Adams is an award-winning education consultant with over 15 years of experience in TESOL and applied linguistics. Her expertise helps students demystify higher education. She provides insights into how to showcase knowledge on assessments and offers tips to remain calm during high-stake test taking. She is currently working as the principal consultant at Society for the Study of Social Problems in USA. Lanisha, thank you so much for joining us today for this event.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you all.
Amazing. Without further ado, let's get started with the event, guys. And to pick this up, I wanted to check in with you through this really simple poll as to what you think is your next move with regard to the tests, right? IELTS, TOEFL, have you taken it? Which one are you taking? So on your screen, you should be able to see a poll which tells you, which helps you answer this question, what is your next move, right? So can we have the poll, please? Okay, we're just waiting for the poll. All right. So while yes, we've got the poll on our screens. Now, what is your next move? Do you think you're going to be taking the IELTS test? Or you're going to be taking the TOEFL? Very important for our panelists to learn about this. Or are you not sure about which test you will be going with, which is absolutely normal, right? A lot of us find it confusing to choose between a certain test, and that's exactly why we're here today. So go ahead and tell me on this poll that you have in front of you on your screen, which one would you be preferring? Would you be preferring an IELTS or a TOEFL? Or you're not sure, that's absolutely fine as an option as well. The last 5 seconds to choose. All right, let's look at the results, please. Okay, the results are here, and interesting. Now, a lot of you are still wanting to decide between which one you should be taking, and absolutely justified, guys. Both are English proficiency tests, and it's still something that needs to be clear with all of you as to which one is probably more justified. Now, a lot of you feel that IELTS is a great option, and a bunch of you even feel that TOEFL is a choice that you would go ahead with. Now, to talk to you about each of these tests, we have Ben and Lanisha. We're going to start off with Ben. Go ahead and share your thoughts around IELTS. Ben, you're on mute.
There we go. All right. So, okay. Just a quick question, Malavika. Shall I share my screen so I've got control of the presentation?
Sure, we can do that.
Super, super. Let's see. I think I need permission from.
Okay. Yeah. I think you'll get it in a couple of seconds. So.
Okay. Yeah, I got one question directly just while you set this out from a student, from somebody on the webinar who asked, wants to go to the US and asked me if he should take IELTS or TOEFL. And very briefly, the question, to answer that, it largely depends on the institution. So you best just go in, because different institutions will have different requirements. But traditionally, it was Australia, UK, Canada, Europe were IELTS-centric, whereas the US was usually TOEFL-centric. However, it has been changing because IELTS has been growing rather aggressively in the US. So nowadays, it's best just to check. Okay, let's just see. Okay, access provided. Right. I'll just see how I can camera face down configuration. Please share the screen.
Yes, you should be able to share your screen, Ben. And in the
Gotcha.
meantime, folks, remember this session, this workshop is an open dialogue. So make sure you're asking your questions, you're sharing your thoughts and opinions around everything that's being shared, right? So let's make this as interactive as we can. Yes, and in a couple of seconds, you should be able to see Ben's screen.
Okay, gotcha. Share. Righty. Let's see, and I'll just start this, and then we're good. We're golden.
Yes.
Present. Beautiful. All right, super. So, as you probably know, I'll give you a brief overview. And first of all, we're just going to look at a very, very sort of like high-level view about what IELTS is, the different streams that are available. We've got academic, we've got general. And then I'm going to dive into specific concerns that I've encountered from students about, you know, taking the test multiple times and overconfidence, I mean, stuck at 6.5 and all of that. And then at the end, I'll tell you about like my personal struggles with IELTS and how I solved those. So let's first of all jump into the IELTS exam. As you know, we've got 4 sections: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And we can choose IELTS General or IELTS Academic. I think the majority of the people on this webinar will be taking the academic route because that's what's usually required for higher education. The General IELTS, that's more for students who are applying for PR in Canada or Australia or England or UK, whatever. So as you know, the writing section is about an hour in total. We've got task 1, task 2. Task 1 academic is usually described as a graphic. It can be a process diagram, a bar chart, a map, a pie chart. And you may think this sounds very straightforward and very easy, but trust me, even native English speakers fail this exam because I'll go into that later in more detail. And that's task 1. And then we've got task 2, which again might seem straightforward, but it's not usually the case. We have questions that can be rather frustrating, and we'll dive into that as well later. And then we've got the speaking section. Again, this, you want to approach this like a job interview. It's not as casual as you may think. And also, the first part, task, is 3 parts basically, part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 is a general introduction, and that's designed to basically relax you, get you familiar with the examiner, and this is a good time to tune into their accent, which will help you later on in the exam. And then part 2 is another challenging thing, because what you have to do is choose a cue card and then talk about that topic for about 2 minutes, which may sound easy, but it's not natural at all. So you also need to specifically prepare for speaking for 2 minutes for non-stop, because it is quite a challenge, especially if you've never done it before. And then part 3 is where the higher level questions will come in, where you'll be talking about abstract ideas and concepts and comparing different things and different ideas. And again, it's definitely worth preparing for that. Even if you're using English every day, it's still worth preparing, because you can get tripped up and it may even seem a little bit tedious, which I'll come to in a second when we dive into the common challenges. And then we've got the listening section. This is the first part of the receptive skills that you need. Again, this is quite challenging, and you will need to do practice test after practice test after practice test when you are preparing for this. And there's a whole range of different questions: multiple choice, gap fill, sentence completion. And again, this needs, even though you might understand every single word that I'm saying now, it is not the same skill that you'll take with you into the exam. You need a specific exam skill for passing these tests. And I was speaking with a successful student the other week, actually, and he accurately pointed out that you need a high level of concentration and basically stamina to stay focused for the entire duration. So again, it's not just being good at listening and understanding English, it's next level. It's like really deciphering what has been said. We can go into that in more detail in a minute as well. And then we've got the reading section, which is another receptive skill. Again, you might be very good at reading, but that does not mean that you're going to be scoring high in the exam, because we need a combination of not just the English reading skills, we need English exam, in this case, reading skills, IELTS exam reading skills, which again, you'll need to practice, not just by increasing the amount of material you're reading, but of course that would help, but ideally, you want to be doing practice test after practice test after practice test. And again, this is a case of concentration and getting familiar with the exam and decoding the questions. So there are plenty of sort of exam-specific skills, and this is exactly why I was saying that even native English speakers can fail with this. Now, I've kind of just gone pretty quickly through the broad overview, because I think what a lot of students are usually worried about, are concerned about, is like, how do we prepare for each section? And what are the common problems for each section? So before we jump into that, I'll just give you an overview of the scoring system, 0 to 9 bounds. Most institutions will usually ask for around a 7, okay? And if you're familiar with the European CEFR framework, that's probably around B2, C1 level, around a band 7. However, just a few days ago, I was talking with a lovely gentleman called Ashish Fernando. I think Malvika knows him pretty well, but he's the owner of iSchoolConnect, and we had an interview for IELTS podcast, and he was very interestingly, he said that now is a great time to apply because they have relaxed this requirement, and now it's probably one of the best times to apply. And it's a great interview. There's lots of insights, and that's coming out on Thursday, but there's loads of value there. There's lots of nuggets like this about what's actually happening now, that there's the universities are becoming a little bit more flexible with the GMAT and with the IELTS, and it's basically probably the best time for a student to embark upon international education right now. And it's counterintuitive. But in my experience, and we talked about this with Ashish, the counterintuitive routes usually seem to be the best, usually seem to be the most smartest choices. Anyway, so as I was saying, we've got the listening, we've got the reading, we've got the writing, we've got the speaking. Now, very briefly, for the listening and the reading, a lot of students may feel the need to join an academy and to prepare for these skills. I don't think that's necessary. I think for the listening and reading, it's practice test after practice test, but we don't just run in blindly and doing them repeatedly all day. What we do with these listening, with the receptive skill test, the listening and the reading, is we go in and we do the tests, and then we find out which section of the test is costing us points, and then we will focus on that specific one. So for the reading, it might be multiple choice questions. If you are losing points in the multiple choice sections, then just do again and again and again the multiple choice section. Just focus on that, and then you will quickly improve. And that's, from my experience, one of the fastest ways. Another effective way, if you're really struggling with the listening and the reading test, is to do them backwards. Is like almost just to go and look at the answers first, and then go and find the questions. And this way you kind of like reverse engineer, and you can learn to sound kind of like literally decode the questions and the question structures. And this way, the next time you do the test, it becomes much easier. But of course, bear in mind that you've got to test which strategy works for you best while you're doing these tests. Some students like to look at the questions first. Actually, in the test, some students like to look at the questions and then look at the text. Other students like to look at the text first and then look at the questions. It's up to you to find out which strategy works best for you. And by the way, just one last thing before we move on to speaking and writing. Do not waste time on YouTube looking at tips and tricks and tests and all this kind of stuff. You're going to get much more bang for your buck, so to speak. You're going to get much higher ROI on your exam preparation by actually doing the tests and actually practicing the speaking and the writing, rather than just looking for these tips and tricks and whatnot. So just bear that in mind. Now then, with the writing, the biggest issue I see is that students will take the test and they'll get stuck at 6.5. And it's incredibly frustrating for a student to be stuck at 6.5, because on paper, it looks very close to the band 7 that's usually requested, the golden band 7. Now, the problem is that a lot of students will take the test again, believing that they're incredibly close, when in reality, probably they're not as close as they may think. And there's a few reasons for this. One is that the examiners who grade the writing, they're given quite a broad sort of like criteria. So one examiner could mark it as 6.5, the other could mark it as 7. And this is kind of like a bit of a mismatch here. So this is why the way to solve this is to go in there overly confident, almost at like a 7.5 level, where it's absolutely irrefutable then that you are at a band 7 or higher. Doing it this way, you're going to save your money, and you're not going to be in this spiral of taking test after test after test after test, which can cost you money, hurt your confidence, and cost you a lot of time as well. Going to the preparation center, paying for the exam fee, doing all the preparation, and then going and only to get the 6.5 again. And by the way, while you are preparing, I would strongly consider the IELTS on computer, especially if you've been typing on computer all your life, because when you write pen and paper, it's difficult to reorganize the essay. It's difficult to edit the essay without it becoming messy, and IELTS on computer kind of solves a lot of these issues. Now then, moving on to the speaking. This is a similar challenge as I was saying at the beginning, that we can go in there overly confident because maybe we've been speaking English all our lives. However, what can usually happen, and this is what I see a lot with especially Indian students, is that they go in there overly confident because they've been speaking English all their life, but the problem is that some of they're very fluent, but there might be a few problems with the accuracy. And now, when we're teaching speaking, especially for the IELTS, we usually break it down into fluency or accuracy. Now, it's kind of funny actually, because Chinese students, they're very concerned of being accurate and they don't like making mistakes. And it really, really slows them down on a fluency level because they're so concerned about speaking perfect, accurate, grammatically correct English. Whereas Indian students and also Spanish students and students from Latino countries, funnily enough, are more on the very confident, very fluent. But the problem is that sometimes the accuracy can be an issue holding them back from that band 7. Now, there's lots of different ways we can go into solving the accuracy issue. But for you, when you're starting your preparation, you really want to just identify which is your problem area. Is it the vocabulary? Is it the accuracy? Is it the fluency? And then kind of isolate it and work on that and work at one issue at a time and then progress to the next one. Now, another issue. Yes, sorry?
On that, I mean, you know, a lot of questions that we are getting in right now.
Okay, yeah, let's go to the questions.
I mean, all of this is so in depth about, you know, the syllabus and the content. I think a few questions have been standard in terms of how do I compare between an IELTS versus TOEFL, or what is the difference in terms of the syllabus as well? Could you throw some light around that?
Okay, one place to start to compare, and yeah, thank you, Malavika, because I can go on forever like a steam train talking about IELTS. So I'm glad that you, I'm glad, and it's always better to listen than to
you know,
speak.
Lanisha, feel free to pitch in and chime in. Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about for comparing. There's two things I'd say on that is one, have a look at the equivalency charts. If you just search into Google equivalency chart, and you can usually see that, okay, it's a B2 in Cambridge CEFR grade, and that equates to a 6.5 or a 7 in the IELTS and X amount of score in the TOEFL. Now, for the actual syllabus, you are best going to the official websites and getting your information there and just having a look and reviewing each exam, because there will be differences.
Right. So the suggestion is go through the curriculum for each and understand closely, evaluate yourself, which aspects of each of those tests make sense to you. What do you feel more comfortable with? I think that's a really good way to go about choosing, one of the top parameters as to which would be a better test for you, right? Among so many other parameters.
And yes. I'd just add, in this case, go to the official site, go to the source, go to IELTS.org, or go to the official TOEFL site, but go to the official one, and then you get the best advice.
Yes, absolutely. I just see a really important point here, when, like you said, official advice. And another point I see, Lanisha, you made in the chat is one second, we see that most community colleges 2-year programs do not require TOEFL or IELTS. That's also an important point. So make sure that if you're applying for a certain college, if there is a specific requirement, check in for that. If there is no requirement for the test, also look for that, right? So understand, you don't want to invest your time in a certain test if it's not a requirement. So yes, very valuable points there. Yeah. Ben, over to you.
Are there any more questions on there that you'd like me to answer?
Plenty, but I think we should move forward. We'll keep bringing them up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I completely lost track of time. However, there's just a few more points that I'd like to mention. And that was, I briefly touched on it before, and that's the difference between exam skills and language skills. And this is why I was saying for the speaking for 2 minutes is not a very natural skill unless you're a bit of a weirdo and obsessed about a certain topic like I am with IELTS. But for the speaking, you don't really get that luxury because you do not choose the topic. So you'll get a cue card, might be about tell me a holiday you had with your best friend. And it can be quite tricky because it's not natural to just talk to somebody, especially in a formal setting, about a holiday you had with a childhood friend. Anyway, so this is what I'm talking about with exam skills, and these do need specific preparation, especially if you're aiming for over a band 7. You cannot just freestyle it. You have to put in some preparation, and there are lots of resources out there. And the same with part 3, because we get abstract questions, and it might be something like, how do you feel about the topic of global warming? Or how do you feel about trust issues with your employer? And these questions, they can be a little bit tricky. So back to my original point, not only do we need language skills, we need specific exam skills, okay? And just one last thing I want to say regarding this is so true for IELTS Academic Task 2, because IELTS Academic Task 2, we're going to get quite a formal question, and it'll be something like, let's see, climate change is an important issue in the 21st century. Some scientists believe that it needs to be addressed soon, while other scientists believe it is
I think we lost Ben there for a couple seconds. No worries about that. He'll join us back in a couple seconds. Meanwhile, we'll just look at the chat section. I think, Lanisha, why don't you go ahead and answer a couple of these for us in the meantime? So I'm seeing this question here. Is this, how do you choose the exam between a graduate or an undergraduate? Should there be a preference between IELTS or TOEFL? Basis that.
I was muted. Yeah, I was
Yes.
muted, so I had to unmute there for a second. I definitely think that in terms of preference, I wouldn't say at that level it matters. I think what you should consider in selecting the exam type is based on your comfort level with what the tasks are being asked to do. So TOEFL, for example, asks for a lot of integrated. You read, some of the skills are overlapping and you have to showcase them. Whereas like IELTS is shorter, it's a shorter exam, and it's a lot more straightforward in certain areas where you don't have the same kind of integrated tasks. So I think that should be your primary consideration. Like, am I comfortable performing these tasks on the assessments?
Got it. So how comfortable are you with the tasks? Understand the tasks at hand. Those will always be some of the top parameters that will help you decide which test is the one for you. Ben, you're back. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lanisha, for filling in with that query. Yes, Ben, I think we're just running on time. So let's quickly look at some of the top limitations that you feel students face.
Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. My connection dropped. I just really want to mention that it's not for task 2. It's not the quality of your ideas. IELTS is a language test. Language is communication. So it's not the quality of the ideas, it's the quality of how you present them. So it's usually better to go for a simple idea expressed eloquently rather than an eloquent idea expressed in a very tricky, it's going to be much more difficult to express an eloquent idea because you're going to have to use so many more grammar functions, and it's easy to trip yourself up. So that's what I wanted to say about the quality of ideas and the difference between the language skills and the exam skills. And these little pieces of advice, this is the exam skills that you get from doing practice papers, from getting feedback, and basically working on both in conjunction, not only your language skills, but your exam skills. Okay. Yeah, do I have more time to go on to the next?
I'll probably give you the last maybe 2 minutes to wind up with the limitations, because I believe we have to head over to TOEFL.
Okay, super. Right then. So as I was saying, yeah, overconfidence is an issue because we've been speaking English probably all our lives, and now we think this is going to be a walk in the park. But as I said, we've got to do the practice tests. We've got to do not only the practice test for the reading and listening, but for the speaking, and especially for the writing, because we may be writing English every day for the last 20 years, but it's different. It's a different type of English. We need academic English. So there's no contractions. It's the highest standard. We're going to be using persuasive writing. All of this is completely different from our everyday written English, and we need to get familiar with that. Next, we've got our, we're stuck at 6.5. This is what I was mentioning before. Students can get frustrated and they take the test again and again. We just need to be aware of what's happening here. Maybe just take a step back and really put in some serious time for the preparation before we go and spend more money on the exam again. Okay, and this relates to my final point of doing IELTS again, because students can get trapped and just thinking, oh, I'm so close, that's 6.5, I'll put in again. And this is a completely natural phenomenon. And I did exactly the same with my driving test in the UK. I took test after test after test, and I was like, I'm so close, I'm gonna get it. And the problem is the smartest thing to do is just take a step back and really work and isolate and identify the specific skill that's pulling you back, that's not getting you to the band 7 that you want. And just one last thing before we finish. When I started teaching IELTS, I was so frustrated. It was so confusing. Even the task 2 questions got me in a bit of a tailspin. And I solved this by asking other teachers, by asking linguistic experts, and that's how I basically set up and I recorded these interviews, and then I tested what worked with my own students and then implemented it in the online course. And all I'm saying is that it's you only fail if you give up. So you just got to keep moving forward with this, and there's plenty of resources out there. So yeah, don't give up and keep moving. And yeah, that's it.
Amazing. I think those are some great insights and fundamentals on IELTS. And, on that note, before we, finish off with IELTS completely, I just want to announce a giveaway that we have from Ben, IELTS Podcast. So you can head over to IELTSpodcast.com/iSchoolConnect -5-offer. You will see an offer from Ben on his services. So we will leave the link for the same in the chat and you can explore it, right? This is great.
Thank you, Malavika. I didn't know whether it was the time to mention that, so thank you very much for mentioning it. I'll just speak a little bit about this. With this, you can get your essay reviewed by our native English speakers, IELTS experts that we've got at IELTSpodcast.com, And getting your essay reviewed and getting feedback is literally the fastest way to improve, because you're going to identify and isolate the problems that's holding you back and get advice on how to move forward. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Malavika.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very quickly, let's head to TOEFL and learn all about that. Lanisha, all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I was very active in the chat. And it's always so fun to be in the chat, but now I won't be in the chat as much, but I will monitor as I'm speaking. The first slide, please.
Yes.
I saw something come in the chat just as I was about to start about coping with exam pressure and making sure that what we call this test anxiety is quelled down. I think the first thing I want to say about this is that we really have to be in the mindset of self-affirmations, number one, and number two, being very tempered about the experience. You're taking an exam, you're being evaluated, you have to remember to make sure you drink plenty of water, you take deep breaths, you do some exercises to really calm yourself, right? Because it's a very high stress manufactured experience. And you should also know that on the other side of the score that you receive, it's not, you shouldn't think of it like this is reflective of my capacity to do anything I hope and want to achieve. This is just a marker, and you receive it as information in, and you move forward, right? You get the score you want, great. But if not, then you move on. Is my audio okay? Some people are saying that my audio isn't good. I don't know if that's
Sounds perfect to me. But
okay.
Yes.
So we heard a lot about IELTS here, and one of the major differences that I'll start by pointing out is that it is in terms of the length, right? So as Ben pointed out, it's about half the time length of this assessment. So this will take you about TOEFL will take you about 4 hours to complete. And I think that's a really big major difference because of the nature of the tasks that are being asked for this assessment. So this test is, in the comments I've been talking about how it's preferred, it's more commonly accepted. However, you know, like Ben was mentioning, IELTS is being accepted at more and more institutions in the US. That's where I'm based, so I have that lens primarily. But I definitely think looking at the university requirements would be very beneficial. And then I put a link in the chat so that you can compare the different assessment scores. So if you got a score on this assessment, you can see, and that information is validated by ETS, the maker of the test. And I've done some consulting work with them. But the main thing you should know is that there are 4 sections, just like on IELTS. So there's reading, listening, speaking, writing. And you see the time limits there. But I want to talk about how the major difference, right? So you have some multiple choice questions. You have, for reading, you have some listening opportunities. But the major difference between the 2 assessments has to do with these integrated tasks. I'm going to go into that quite a bit, but I just want to point out that you know, you're also asked to express opinions and also make arguments in ways that are reflective of what you often encounter in an academic context in the US. So it's like, you want to argue a lot. Like I think a lot of the emphasis on higher education has to do with what are the main points, especially in the humanities and social sciences, which are foundational for every degree, even if you're doing a more scientific degree. Next slide, please. With integrated, let me define what that means. And I didn't mention that, but essentially it means you'll use 2 or more skills to answer the questions, right? So you're kind of taking one and incorporating it into another to perform the task. In the reading section, pretty much there are 3 to 5, it's about 72 minutes long max. You read 3 to 5 long passages from academic texts, and you'll answer some questions. And what's important to mention about this is that the passages cover a variety of topics, and the content is from university level textbooks that you would encounter in a discipline, and it ranges from all different kinds of disciplines. You don't have to be familiar with the topic. That's a common worry, and you should be able to read even if it's, you know, electromagnetism or something about fine arts. It doesn't really matter. Some of the vocabulary you may not be familiar with, but each reading type, each passage has a glossary to define words not commonly used. And so the section is really testing, you know, what is your knowledge as it relates to these 8 different areas, right? So you'll receive multiple choice questions that ask 8 different kinds of information. So there's factual information. What are the major ideas? What are the supporting details? What does this word mean? How is this defined? You'll have negative factual information. So which one of these is false? You'll have to infer, right? So you'll have to look and see from the passage what's not explicitly stated. There are some rhetorical prompts asking like why the author is presenting information in a particular way. What is the author trying to argue? Again, argument is very important. Vocabulary, like identifying meanings of words and phrases. So the glossary is for like words that are more complicated for a particular field, whereas vocabulary is really getting to the meaning of more commonly used things, like what is inference, or you know, commonly used words. And there are sentence implication, where you have to identify a sentence that has essentially the same meaning as another sentence. Inserting text, where you actually, it's an interactive piece where you pretty much add to, it's assessing your understanding of the logical order of ideas in a reading passage, and then you can add that there. Hi, Guy.
Hi.
We have a new person joining. And then there's another question type having to do with prose summary, where you have to take a closer look at the major ideas and be able to answer a multiple choice the relative importance of the information in the particular reading passage. So like Ben showed you, like on that reading section, for the content of the IELTS exam, you'll see then that this is a little bit different. And it's all multiple choice, obviously, because you're just reading and responding to showcase that you can read well according to these 8 kinds of information. Next slide, please.
Yes, and just want to quickly chime in. For those wondering why Guy, I mean, if Guy is going to be participating in this particular discussion, Guy and a couple others are joining in real soon in the next few minutes for the upcoming workshop, which is going to be all around how do you manage and put together an economical budget when you are studying abroad. So if you want to study on a budget, and you know it's an important priority for you, stay tuned. We will be talking about that very, very soon. Right? Hi, Guy. We'll get going in a few minutes.
Yeah, I love that.
Sorry.
And also, no worries. Someone in the chat asked me, because I talked about the community colleges not necessarily requiring an IELTS or a TOEFL exam if you're studying internationally in the US. And someone asked, well, what's a community college? A community college is like, it's a 2-year university, and typically they offer degrees that are called associate degrees. So you go to the 2-year university and you study the first 2 years of a 4-year degree. And what's cool about those kinds of institutions is that once you're there, after 2 years, you matriculate, or you can transfer into the 4-year institution, and you can save a lot of money that way. They're typically less expensive and whatnot. So I'll let them jump on that in the next panel, but I did want to mention this. And so for listening, we skipped, but essentially the listening, there are 2 types of listening items in the speaking section, and there's lectures and conversations. And again, the emphasis is on using campus-based languages. So campus-based language. And then the scoring is based on 3 dimensions. How clear is the speech? Pronunciation is emphasized, but don't mistake pronunciation with accent. Everybody has an accent. Clearly, Ben has one. I have one. I'm from Southern California. I live in Washington, D.C. Everybody has accents, right? It's a misnomer to think we don't. What are these assessments looking for if you're a native English speaker is, are you clear? Can we tell the difference between this word from another word? Are you making emphasis of points? Is the pace at a natural rate, right? And are you speaking in a length that that is fluid? If I were to start speaking in Armenian, which I haven't studied in a long time, you will see that it's not going to be at the level of clarity that we should have, that I am operating in English right now. The second dimension has to do with language use. So again, looking at the efficiency of word choice and the grammatical structures to convey meaning. Word choice has to do with vocabulary, right? So you want to be picking and choosing, expressing language in ways that show complexity. Like Ben said, you know, this is to reflect what you do in an academic setting. And one key tip is when you're speaking, you want to showcase the basic argument structure. So you state the topic, you give some information, you provide a transition, and then you say, first of all, I think the second point that I'm making has to do with this, and then you conclude. I think it's also important to keep in mind discourse phrases like that are complex, right? Which gives you more points. As a result, consequently, moreover, therefore, to show, to link ideas. So you can like kind of showcase that you know how to do that verbally. Next slide, please. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I think we skipped. No, we didn't. Well, this is the right slide, sorry. So for the writing section, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 types of writing that you'll do. There's an independent writing task, which is pretty much a personal essay based on your opinions and arguments. And then there's an integrated task that you'll do where you'll read a passage, you listen to a lecture, and then you write about the arguments comparing in both of those inputs. And the main thing that I want to emphasize about the writing section for this is that the writing structure does not depend on the question type. I'll mention the question types next, but the structure that I want you to have in mind has to do with like a template. I'm gonna provide you with a high score template structure that works pretty well on these assessments, and interestingly enough, in actual classrooms where you're writing in English and showcasing your thoughts and arguments. It's important to refer to both sources in the integrated types, and I'll talk more about the different question types in the next slide. So for the integrated question types, there are 6 that I'll showcase here. I'll talk about the primary 2. Next slide, please. There are 6, right? And so I kind of go into detail, and these, what you see here is directly from, is what you would see on the assessment. ETS produces, is the maker of the TOEFL exam, and all of the pretty much prompts, question types, practice exams are available on their website, official website. And this language is what you see on the exam. It doesn't really change. It hasn't changed in quite some time. And so I want to focus on A and B. So the first 2 are by far the most common, where you hear a lecture and pretty much it contrasts with the reading. So remember, you're gonna be listening to something, you're gonna have to read something, listen to something, and then write. So in order to do that well, you have to take really good notes, but pretty much summarize the main points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast doubt, right? And then summarize the main points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they challenge specific claims or arguments made in the reading passage. So again, it's all based on argument. Next slide, please. One of the, here are the essay templates easy templates for your writing section. So pretty much in the introduction, you want to come out saying, because it's asking you, right, like compare and contrast. Tell me about how they relate to each other. You start off by saying the reading and lecture are both about, boom, you insert the topic. Then you say the author of the reading argues, main point, and then the lecturer disagrees with the claims made by the author, another point. I'm not going to go into each of these, but I think the language that is written here, it's almost like if you wanted a little cheat sheet, you could kind of memorize this structure to help you as you're approaching this kind of writing. It's very, very, very important. It's almost like if you want a high score, and I've scored these exams, I've helped write these exams, I'm just telling you, like, inside knowledge, this is kind of the sweet spot. You want to have in your mind, what's a good template for me to kind of have plugging in information. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to talk about is the notes function. I have here, notes are your BFF. BFF is a little slang acronym that stands for best friends for life. And essentially through this exam, they will be your best friend for life. This image isn't very clear, and I'm not going to have a lot of time to really dive deep on it. But if you look there, you'll see that it's an example of, on the left side, you see the notes that were written from the reading. And it's like 1, 2, 3. So that's what I'm going to put in the intro, or first, second, third point. So I'm honing in on different components of what I read. And then when I was listening for what was the same or what was different as it compares to my notes on the reading passage. So that way you can use these notes when you're writing your essay. And that's one thing that's allowed, right? So you can't take, you'll have the reading passage there. When you listen to the audio, you're not going to be able to go back to that. The reading, you can see it's right there. But this is very important, like your notes, and you're not going to have a lot of time, right? So you're going to have to really use your notes in a clear way. And I want to emphasize, what does the author claim? What does the lecturer say? Those are two things you're going to be listening for and thinking about. And you don't want to do word for word. You want to paraphrase. And you also want to remember that once you have these quality notes, you're just going to insert the notes into the template that you memorize. It's kind of like burned into your brain, right? Like, these are the first points. This is what the author thinks. This is what the lecturer says. This is what this means, right? And it's very difficult because it's really taxing to have both of those skills assessed at the same time. I'll stop there, but before I totally end and answer some questions, I'll just say improving your skills requires, a lot of practice in any language. With this kind of academic writing, it's important to get real life input. So listen to Ben's podcast, listen to other podcasts. There's an app called Clubhouse that's amazing. And it's only on iPhones, but if you know someone who can invite you, you can go into these rooms and listen to audio, and it really comes to life. And you'll have a whole plethora of all the different accents. And then you can also do the practice exams, and I will go on YouTube to also use those resources to really get your English input up, because you want to be able to say, okay, what are these people talking about? What do I think about that? And we Americans, we like to argue. So this whole exam is all about arguing.
Amazing. That was so insightful, Lanisha. I think all of us learned, the fundamentals of these tests. How do you put together a cheat sheet as simple as that? I think, if someone's, screenshot that, I'm pretty sure my team's going to share these pointers later through the upcoming mailers. So I think that was so insightful. Those were some really helpful points. And, this brings me to a very important giveaway that we have, especially for all of you guys. We've put together sample paper guides for IELTS and TOEFL. You have the link right here on the screen. It's bit.ly/IELTS START_TOEFL_giveaway. So you can go ahead and check that out. We've even shared the details over chat right now. So you can go ahead and bookmark those pages. And of course, we will share the links again over mail as well. And if you do register for the giveaway, then we will send across to you by the coming week, right? So we're going to get to the questions in a bit. But before that, let me remind you, we are walking towards our next session, which is going to be about all around how you can put together your, studying abroad journey in the best possible budget. So how do you study on a budget? We will be talking about that super soon, so stay tuned for that as well. Now, before I actually head to the questions, just want to quickly introduce iSchoolConnect to all of you here. Now, iSchoolConnect is essentially a tech company, and we assist students through the whole process of studying abroad. So if you are, going through this journey where you are wanting to choose the right country, the right university, the right course, of course, you're wanting to prepare for your tests, you need support with that. And of course, you need handholding with, your application process, be it your essays, your SOPs, your scholarship application. Now, all of those things, plus, your visa interviews, if you need assistance through that entire journey, then definitely go ahead and check out iSchoolConnect.com. The sign up is absolutely free. Make sure you go ahead and explore, right? So I'm seeing a lot of compliments for the giveaways. Of course, why not? I think a lot of effort has been put into putting those together. Now, before we conclude the session, of course, we have our questions and an array of them. So I'm going to do a quick rapid fire round of questions with you, Lanisha and Ben, and please go ahead and answer these. Now, we have a question over here. Now, does it, so online platforms that you recommend for students to learn about IELTS or TOEFL, which would that be?
Well, there's a decent site called IELTSpodcast.com I heard of. Just off the
top. Yes, absolutely. So
shameless plug. Shameless plug there.
Yes, shameless plug there, but why not?
Yeah,
for
but
IELTS, yes.
Sorry, I just want to mention one thing. I mentioned this before, but when you're doing the test papers, I believe official, and I put this in the chat, that I believe the official material is always a good place to start. And I've heard as well that the Cambridge exam books are slightly more difficult than the actual official exam. And going with Cambridge material, you can be certain that it's official. It's going to be very, very similar to the exam. And if you're doing it slightly at a level that's slightly more difficult than the official one, then you're over preparing, which is always a good thing. And just one last thing. You can often find these books, scans of these books on scribd.com. I've heard you've just got to do a search, and you can find lots of past papers there, which is probably more economical than buying 20 odd Cambridge books. So it's a good resource there, good resource to start for your listening and your reading, for your reading specifically.
Amazing. We have quite a few important pointers there. Now, next question, speaking section, how do you introduce yourself, your personal self? What do we do about that?
Lanisha, do you want to do for TOEFL, and then I'll do for IELTS? Is that all right?
Oh yeah, for sure. So for TOEFL, you know, it's not asking for it's asking what you think, right? So you want to make sure that you have a very clear structure in your response. So following the same kind of template, you know, you pretty much want to stick to this is what the thought is in terms of the response, because IELTS is very different. And then these are my thoughts. And then first point, second point, third point, conclude.
Right, right. So structure your introduction so that you are comfortable with each point that you put forward. I think that would be the best way to introduce your personal self, right? And I think one last question, because we are ready to head towards the last to the third session for the evening, and then we'll have the fourth, of course. Any preference that universities might have? Do they favor IELTS versus TOEFL? Is there a preference among universities?
I think it's usually university specific, but traditionally, traditionally it's usually like the UK, Canada, Ireland, and probably Europe and Australia. Traditionally, we're more IELTS focused, and then North America, USA was traditionally TOEFL, but it has been changing because IELTS has been growing and TOEFL has been growing as well. So I would really go for this, check the actual specific university requirements. I think that's the safest way.
Absolutely. Amazing, amazing. This was so insightful. Thank you for, taking out the time. Ben, Lanisha, this was a fantastic session. I can see the comment section. The students are really so grateful for everything that you've answered and you've put together. So once again, thank you so much for being on this workshop with us. And yeah, amazing.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank you very much, Malavika, for hosting us. You did a fantastic job.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much, Lanisha.